Hello everyone, my name is Phillip and I would like to share with you my career choice today. I chose civil engineering. And most of the time whenever I tell people this, I get the question, what is a civil engineer? What do you plan on doing with that degree? And the first thing I tell them is I want to survey land. Surveying land is called the detailed study or inspection as by gathering information through observations, measurements in the field, questionnaires, or research of legal instruments in support of planning, designing, and establishing property boundaries. Now, as we went through that definition, that probably doesn't mean a hill of beans to most people. So now we'll get into some real world examples that will probably help break it down and help you realize that you probably had more dealings with land surveyors than you think. So if you've ever owned a home or a piece of property or anything like that, you more than likely have had dealings with surveyors. Because the deeds and titles and descriptions of boundaries, property lines are determined and mapped out by surveyors. So if you've ever owned a home or property, then you have had dealing with surveyors, whether you realize it or not. And on a little bit bigger scale, housing development, subdivisions, all that requires a surveyor before anything can be built. And because you obviously do not want somebody building on top of your property. Some other vital roles that they play are in construction, roadways, transportation, mapping out legal boundaries, and all that. So land surveyors, they play a big role in everything communities being built around. So next we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about the job requirements, conditions. So they mainly work outside, as you can see here. So if you don't like to work outside, this probably is not a career choice for you. That's the reason why I chose this career choice, because I love working outside. Even though they do work outside the majority of the time, they do have a little bit of office time also. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You also need to be fluent in geometry, trigonometry, physics, engineering, and law. You have to do a lot of math with surveying land, a lot of numbers. And then here comes the computer stuff where it ties into the office time. You need a good understanding of AutoCAD and SolidWorks. After you get done surveying the land and all that, you will come back into the office, and that's where you use AutoCAD most of the time and draw up everything that you've surveyed. You also need to be able to switch gears really quickly, because you're liable to be working 2 or 3 different jobs and within the same week. So you need to be able to switch from, you might be working on a road one day and you might be working on a small bit of property the next. So you need to be able to switch gears quickly. And so some of the purposes of a surveyor are the plotting of subdivisions. As you can see here, you have to get all the measurements and stuff, where the houses are going to go, where the streets are going to go. So that's a surveyor's job there, to make sure you're not building on top of somebody else's property. And then some topographic surveys. That's those little funky maps that you've probably seen in school, and then you're getting the measurements of the contours and elevation from above. And those are pretty neat. And then delineating wetlands. Whenever you're building next to a pond or a river or whatever it may be, you do not want to mess with the wildlife, so you got to make sure you don't want your house to flood either, so you got to make sure you have a good distance and all that away from the wetlands. So here are some of the types of surveys. You have a boundary survey, which determines property lines. That's probably the number one survey that we deal with as common folk. You have those whenever if you own a piece of property or a house or anything like that. Then you have the topographic survey. As we just talked about, that's getting the elevations and contours from above the earth, or above the land. As built on mortgage determines that whatever you're building does not interfere with somebody else's property lines or their easements. And then you have the land title survey, which is what ensures that your property title. The construction survey is the bigger scale survey there. That's a new construction, roads, buildings, things like that, like subdivisions, all that stuff. And then the wetland delineating survey we just previously talked about, as far as preservation for the wetlands, just making sure you're not too close and things like that. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit more. We're going to talk about some of the tools and techniques of a surveyor. The techniques haven't really changed since the beginning of the time, but the tools have changed quite a bit. For instance, they used to use a chain that was called a gunner's chain. It was at a predetermined length, and they would have to go out and walk it out, and that's how they would get their measurements. Nowadays, we pretty much get everything through GPS. Back in the 90s, technology and advancements and all that technology, everything is pretty much computer driven. It's really, really neat how they get all their stuff through GPS. They come out there and they can shoot a laser. They use laser finders. They can shoot a laser and get measurements that are accurate within 20 to 40 millimeters. They also use drones. They use all kinds of advancements nowadays as far as surveying goes. Whereas you used to have a whole crew to survey. You can pretty much survey land by yourself now. It has made it so much faster and so much more accurate with the advancements of technology. And so now that we've covered the definition, the roles, and sort of what it takes to be a surveyor, the tools and the techniques, and their purpose, I would like to offer any questions if any of you guys have any. And if not, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to come speak.